once again. As we can see, our participants have arrived. We are at about 60. Welcome everyone to the IBASA and EPI webinar seminar. We have three amazing panelists. It's Wendabai, it's Kenneth, as well as Riani. Welcome, gentlemen. Carol, thank you very much for assisting us with the production at the back end. And Christoph and I will be hosting this webinar today, as our topic is advising small business clients under distress. Is business rescue an option? Welcome. So we will kick off with a poll. What portion of your clients are currently under distress? Please feel free to respond to the webinar to the poll as it pops up on your cell phone or on your laptop. If anyone wants to respond on the Facebook, please feel free to share that as well on Facebook. Thank you. So it's none, only few, about a quarter, about a half of your clients, 3/4 of your clients, and lastly, you're not sure, all of the above. Okay, so far about half. Hey, Christoph, is the response?
Yeah, so if people can just, if it's hidden behind another window, sometimes that happens too. If you can't find on your computer the poll, or if you're on a cell phone or a tablet, you can just swipe between the pages and you'll find the poll. And it's quite easy. You can just vote there, sort of what portion of your clients are currently under distress. EPI is also involved in an initiative called Stay in Business, Tobeka, where we, in the past weeks, have had several events. And normally, it comes out that more than half of the businesses that are joining us are thinking that they may not make between 2 and 6 months. So this topic is really important for us to cover today. And I see here that we have about a quarter of people voting at the moment, about half. And then if you add, about all of them is another quarter. So, so most of our businesses are, in fact, under distress. Maybe we can end the poll and share that with everyone. So that's kind of interesting to note.
All right. Yep, that's quite interesting feedback. So let's see now how we go as we have our first speaker, right, Christoph?
Yeah, Wendabai may not be unfamiliar with many people in IBASA at least. So Wendabai, if you can switch on your camera, and we can see you, and also your microphone. It worked just now, so you've got your sound on and also the video. I know that you're on your phone, so that maybe you must just find the right place to tick the... There you are. There you are.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, and a very good morning to our audience this morning across all platforms. Nice to be here.
So I'll be paging forward for you, Wendabai, and I know you've got lots of good information to share. So excuse me if I prompt you by paging forward.
No problem.
But the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So good morning again, everyone. I normally start a presentation with some serious talk. For 2020, for me, when I look at it, it's one amazing year. I think we'd all agree that this is one year that we'd like to forget. So many things happened, and what you see on the slides are just some of the events that we witnessed early on this year. Obviously, the big one being the credit rating downgrades, and the COVID couldn't have come at a worse time. That threw even our initial budget that was presented by our Minister of Finance out. So given everything that is happening, Chris, if we can just move along. Given the situation that we do have now, it would be then reasonable to actually believe that there's no way that it is business as usual. I think we hear about our politicians and our leaders telling us that we are now in the new normal. Okay, when we look at exactly what has gone through these past few months, there's definitely a situation where we have to adjust. Now, just for the purpose of this discussion, we do not dispute that businesses do fail. I can see there's a very nice picture for you there on the left-hand side, and that's the kind of situation that I actually want us to picture this morning. That it is possible that things can go wrong, and sometimes things do go wrong, and it's inevitable. It happens in every aspect of our lives. However, when things are going to go wrong, we need to be prepared for it. In business, we say you need a separate set of strategies for times like this. We call them decline strategies. And I have noted, especially in the academic circles, that you won't find business rescue quite a bit in some publications. And that's because the business rescue as a decline strategy is fairly new and still unknown to most. But in times like this, where there's business decline, then we have to be on our guard. We need to be very vigilant. We need to be very attentive, and we need to assist businesses to come up with strategies that will help them to turn the corner. Now, on the listing that you are able to see there, it's just some of the strategies, and I'm sure the most popular one that we are conversant with is liquidations. This is where everything just shuts down, okay? And it's important that we bring this into context so that we understand what this business rescue is, which is what we are discussing here today, whereby we are saying, let's not go to the worst case scenario of liquidations where we wind up, we lose jobs and we move on. There are other alternatives, okay? So across all those decline strategies that you've just seen, you're going to see the three that I want us to purposely look at and analyze in terms of alternatives, okay? And the liquidation really for me is the one where we are saying, if we could, we should avoid that. The reality is in business that businesses do get to a point where liquidation is the only option, where the business is no longer viable, either the business model has failed or other circumstances within the business environment dictate that the business should close. Okay, we do accept that. But where distress causes certain uncomfort or discomfort in the business to the point where it only needs a little bit of time and breathing space to restructure its activities so that it can return back to profitable operations. This is now where business rescue comes in to say, can we buy some time, okay? However, please take note that business rescue is not for the terminally ill. So you don't want to sort of like sanction business rescue when the ship is already sinking. By the time the ship starts to leak water, you should be able to know that this is the time for you to actually make that call. And this is one of the problems that has been identified predominantly in the small to medium-sized businesses, whereby both directors and probably their advisors don't take proactive measures to measure liquidity, measure solvency on a regular basis so that they can identify in real time when there is actually a problem that needs to be addressed. Because if you do identify the issues way ahead of time, then you can determine whether you want to go the turnaround route, whereby, remember now, in terms of turnaround, you are not financially distressed, so you are still able to pay your creditors and your liabilities as and when they fall due, but you are saying your business is in decline, but you have ample time for you to turn that around. Now, for business advisors, very, very important on this one is there is an opportunity there, because when companies engage in turnarounds, they can either do it internally or they can engage the services of professional turnaround specialists. Okay, that's where business advisors need to come in. Where the business is now distressed, so which means they're not able to pay their liabilities as they fall due, then they should consider business rescue. We can move ahead, Christoph. Okay, so let's look at the business rescue because it's what we want to focus on. And I just had to mention there that business rescue is going to be turning 10 years old. So happy birthday to business rescue in advance for next year. So you will notice that it's a fairly new phenomenon, and maybe that's why a lot of people don't understand it, and that's why we need to educate the public. Okay, we can move on, Christoph. If I can just have the next slide there for me. Okay, there we go. So just I think in a nutshell for us to understand where business rescue emanates from. So the key legislation that supports business rescue obviously be your Companies Act 2008 amended. And the birth of that particular statute gave birth to business rescue. Okay, and what it brings to us is the concept of turnarounds and corporate rescue that aligns to international norms. Okay. So let me just sort of like highlight for you what business rescue is in a nutshell very quickly. So you're going to find that most of the regulations there, you find them in section 128 of chapter 6, and business rescue is about rehabilitation. So like we said, where the business finds itself in sort of like a moment of distress where they are unable to pay their liabilities as and when they forge. And now, mind you, when we talk about the solvency and liquidity tests here, we are not talking about the now, but we're talking about in the next 6 months. Then they can sanction business rescue. And what this enables is for the appointment of an independent professional, who we are going to discuss later in terms of a business rescue practitioner, to sort of like facilitate a rehabilitation of the entity. And ensure that they restructure, because in some cases what you find is that it's actually just about restructuring the business. Sometimes it's restructuring the loans, and sometimes it's just ensuring financing that it's available. So we talk about post-commencement finance, and it's those kind of activities which then the business rescue practitioner needs to come in and administer. So that is what happens under business rescue. So you see the temporary supervision there. Which means then the business rescue practitioner is actually supervising the entity in that during that period. Okay, the third point, the most important and the most attractive for most entities when they go into business rescue, is that temporary, what we call the moratorium. And what that essentially does is it sort of like gives breathing space. It's more of a time shield for the entity, where it's protected from legal proceedings, is protected essentially from being ravaged by creditors, to enable it to restructure its affairs so that it can return to profitable operations. Okay. So these for me are the key concepts and the key elements why businesses will need business rescue. Okay, and obviously the implementation of a business rescue plan, which is normally drawn up by a business rescue practitioner. Please take note, the main aim here is to maximize the likelihood of the company continuing in existence on a solvent basis. So we do talk about a reasonable test, a reasonable prospect. So in short, if a business rescue practitioner came in and they're trying to salvage this particular entity, but according to their analysis and investigations into the affairs of the business, there's no reasonable prospect for a business to be rescued. In that case, then the business rescue practitioner must then proceed with liquidation. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so just a few other points there just to point out very quickly. If you can just run through that quickly for me, Chris. So obviously, in all this, we aim to balance stakeholders' interests. And for me, this is the core function and core importance of Chapter 6. In that, probably if you were to look at a comparative to Chapter 6, we used to have judicial management under the Old Companies Act. However, the judicial management under the Old Companies Act was more leaning towards creditors. So what Chapter 6 actually does is a more balanced approach towards the interest of stakeholders, whereby we say, let's look at the interest of the shareholders. Let's look at the interest of the employees. We are in a time where there's so many retrenchments, so many job losses. How do we save jobs? Okay, at the same time, obviously looking at the interest of the creditors and the trade unions. Okay, so that is really what Chapter 6 has aimed to do. Okay, so I think I've actually mentioned that point already, where we're saying it does a lot of protection against what I like to term trigger happy creditors. Okay, so initiating a business rescue is not tedious. And you can see there that I think all it does is once the directors or the officials of the business have done the tests and they've identified the fact that there is financial distress, then they can actually commence business rescue by simply adopting a resolution. So that is where you have shareholders adopting to actually enter into rescue based on the fact that they are financially distressed. The other way through which business rescue proceedings are initiated are through a court order. This is where any other of the interested parties that we just looked at previously would be keen to adopt business rescue. Any other interested stakeholders can actually initiate business rescue through an order of court. Okay, please take note, and these items, I specifically put them in red, that these are very vital exceptions. Okay, so one, if liquidation order has been granted against a business, please take note that you cannot commence business rescue. Okay, if a liquidation order, the application, not even the order itself, but if the application, the process of a liquidation is initiated, you cannot commence business rescue. The other side of it is true as well, that once business rescue has been adopted by way of resolution, then no liquidation order can be placed against the business. Okay. All right, so I think in terms of the process, the next presenter is going to discuss this in greater detail, but essentially what needs to happen is obviously depending on whether you are going by court order, by resolution. Once that is initiated, there are administrative procedures which you need to follow in order for you to give notice to the CIPC and file certain notices, which includes COR 123.1. But the next presentation is going to go into detail on that. Okay. So what are the implications? What happens once you initiate rescue? Okay, so like we said, you can easily file for business rescue, or it needs is a resolution. Then when I think in the next presentation, we're going to go into detail in terms of the actual requirements, the documentation that needs to be submitted. Please note that the necessary documentation has to be complete, including the necessary affidavits for that process for CIPC to actually undertake that particular process, that particular business rescue initiation. I think I already indicated the fact that no one can actually execute court orders or commence.
Did we lose Winterby there now? Winterby, are you still with us? Oh, there you're back. There you're back.
Oh, I'm okay. Okay, thank you so much. Yes. So when we spoke about temporary moratorium, that's what exactly we meant, that no one can execute court proceedings against a business once you're in rescue. So it's a very vital element of proceedings whereby it gives the business breathing space so that they can sort of like work their way around their state, financial state, and probably return to profitable operation. Then obviously the COR 123.1 is what needs to be filed with the CIPC, but that will be covered in detail in the next presentation. All right, so then we come to the business rescue practitioner, and I'm sure a lot of business advisors around the table are quite keen to say, how can you participate into this particular process? So in my own professional understanding, you actually do not need to be a business rescue practitioner to add value to the process. As you might have seen on the slides which I presented earlier, the process of turnaround and business rescue are quite closely linked. If we had our own option, okay, we would prefer that a lot of these activities and the turnaround activities take place before it reaches that stage where companies become financially distressed. Okay, so we obviously need to understand this process, but should a company then be financially distressed, then obviously they need to commence business rescue proceedings, and they need to appoint a business rescue practitioners. Now, and again, I'm sure the next presenter is going to go into detail in terms of the qualification, but just a key highlight there is according to Regulation 126, okay, it does actually hint that the commission must look at the applicant's education and experience sufficient to equip that particular person in terms of functions of business rescue. Now, just a point of, I think just clarification there, is business rescue normally attracts professionals from all forms of professions. So you have accountants, you've got legal practitioners, you've got businesses, business advisors, you've got people that consider themselves as entrepreneurs. However, none of those skills or none of those professions can adequate on their own for business rescue. It's a whole combination set. So we normally want to refer to a business rescue practitioner as a professional with a very unique composite set of skills that is then able to assist a business to sort of like navigate the difficult times. But yes, they will look at qualifications. Okay. So the business rescue practitioner, one of the key things that I think we discussed this under challenges as well, is that once this person is appointed, currently there's really no provision of them being taken out. And if you ever have a situation where you are distressed or your client is in distress and you institute business rescue proceedings, please take note that the business rescue practitioner is an officer of court. And by that, what we mean is obviously that if that person is to be removed, only the court can be able to do that. All right, only the court can be able to remove the business rescue practitioner. And obviously some of the grounds on which they may be removed is if there was misconduct or there was fraud or there's a complaint against a practitioner. In some cases, you might have a situation where maybe some affected parties feel that the practitioner is not properly suited in terms of qualifications and experience for that particular role, then they can be removed. Okay, and then I think going into the final sections here, just a few administrative challenges. I think harmonizing different stakeholders' views. So we are still at a phase in business rescue where the competing stakeholder interests sometimes cause conflict. So you obviously have creditors who might not view business rescue in a very good light because obviously it puts some of their rights in jeopardy. So just harmonizing, I think, the stakeholders' views is important for me. The other challenge that you're going to find around business rescue and for companies that enter into business rescue proceedings is the minute you enter and initiate business rescue proceedings and the CIPC has processed that particular applications, your business status on your CIPC actually does change. So where your business normally says in business, it will change to say in business rescue. And what that sort of like does, because of the lack of education and also obviously the issue of mistrust and the risk factor that is associated, what we then normally find is a lot of companies are not willing to come to the table and offer what we call post-commencement financing. Okay, so those are just some of the challenges. So some business rescues actually become difficult to implement and they become unsuccessful because of the lack of post-commencement finance. And then obviously the last one is just the legislation which needs to, I think, to be aligned so that we have clarity on certain proceedings. And quickly, just moving on, so uncertainty, I think that has been mentioned. So just here, just a few key facts. I think these are my last two slides around business rescue. And you'll be very interested to know, I think there are a few points that I want us to get from here. One is the contentious question, which is normally asked to say, but how effective and how successful is business rescue? All right, and the honest truth is it's a little bit very difficult. It's a little bit difficult for us to judge how successful it is, because when you go into business rescue, every business goes into business rescue with very specific objectives. All right, sometimes it's just restructuring of debt, which means if a business rescue practitioner is able to move into the entity and restructure that debt and the creditors are happy, that's a successful business rescue. However, you're going to notice from this slide in terms of the termination that about a third of business rescue proceedings end up in liquidations. Okay, and that's the point that we said earlier on. And this is typical and expected because a lot of businesses and directors and even their advisors sometimes are not proactive in analyzing financial information, doing the key financial tests to determine whether there is actually a prospect of a problem or not. And mostly when they say or identify that there's a problem, then usually that is a little bit too late for them to actually sort of like resolve. So a lot of rescue proceedings end up in liquidations, and there's also a fair amount of proceedings, business rescue proceedings, which get terminated on the basis that the business rescue practitioner is going to come in and they'll just find that there was no distress. And so why would businesses go into business rescue if there's no distress? Well, a lot of them are seeking that temporary moratorium, which is a protection. So some just initiate proceedings to protect themselves from creditors. I must emphasize that that's not the objective of business rescue.
So whenever we have some time set aside after the IBASA update today to actually go a bit more in depth. Maybe you can just kind of punt what's going to be happening there. What should people stay on for at the end of the webinar for you to follow through? So thank you very much. I think you gave us a really good introduction there, specifically around the options too. That business rescue is one of the options as a strategy. You know, sort of it's not the only one. But it is one that is now available that 10 years ago wasn't, you know, sort of. And of course, as business advisors, we need to know how we can support our clients if they are in distress. And we are expecting that this is going to be the case, unfortunately, more so now than in the past. Plus, it may be a career opportunity for some of us.
Yes. So definitely, thank you there, Chris. So at the end of the webinar, I think after the third presentation, we're going to have an open session where we have questions and answers. We find that business rescue questions and inquiries are quite specific to individuals. So we're actually going to engage more on that. But also on the IBASA platform, there's going to be quite a series of such webinars and publications and information that's going to be provided through, including a detailed article. I don't know, Chris, if we do have the article available for download as well, on which this presentation was based. So there's going to be quite some ample information as well as presentations post this webinar where we can engage more on the matter of business rescue.
Great stuff. So don't run away at the end of the webinar if you are interested in that, because there will be time to go in a bit more depth and for sharing that resources too. So we also on the call, as Tobeka mentioned earlier, have Vuyani Nkolhla from the Commission for IP and Companies, which is the agency tasked for controlling and regulating and managing the affairs of business rescue. But before we get to you, Vuyani, let's ask this question for people in the room, for our participants. So if you haven't done so, by the way, there are two important buttons for you as an attendee of the webinar. We don't want everyone just to sit and absorb, but also to participate. The one is the text chat. There's a little speech bubble at the bottom of your window that you can click, and that will open a field for you to be able to type in text. Make sure that you send it to all panelists and attendees, and then you can answer this question: which is more suitable for your clients, business rescue or turnaround? So Mweneba explained to us that those are some of the options that we have, and if you can explain why, you know, sort of, then maybe we can incorporate your thoughts there later on in our webinar. Which is more suitable, do you reckon, for the kind of clients that you are serving, and why would that be? There's also a second button while you think about that you can click, which is the Q&A, and I see there's not been any action there, but I'm sure there are questions. So if you want us to address any questions, please click that Q&A button and put your question there. And that's where we park the questions for attending after our presentations. So please do so if you have a question, the Q&A button. Otherwise, I don't see any activity in the text chat. I'm trying to follow.
Yeah, there's just one question from Paul that we can maybe answer, but he can transfer it to the Q&A. Is how affordable is business rescue to small and micro enterprises, especially EME?
Okay, so that is kind of related to the question here too. How suitable is business rescue and turnaround? You know, sort of, so costs are involved and there are all kinds of things to consider. So we can refer that back to our panelists when we get to Q&A a bit later. But let's turn to Vuyani now, Tobeka. I think we are kind of a bit pressed for time because we know that people have schedules to meet and so on too. So welcome, Vuyani. While we see that people are there, I see Gwyneth has started something in. Please share your ideas around business rescue versus turnaround and the suitability of that for your clients, and then we can pick that up during the Q&A too. But in the meantime, let's put up your slides. Sorry, I didn't put up the, silly of me. I didn't share the question, which I intended to do, which is more suitable for your client's business rescue or turnaround. So by the way, Tobeka is on, it jumped from stage 2 to stage 1, and unfortunately I didn't know that, but if we have load shedding, if it goes from stage 2 to stage 1, the actual time had changed too. So it was on stage 2 and we were expecting her to be okay, but 12 o'clock stage 1 load shedding happened because they moved to stage 1, you know, sort of. So how that works, I don't know, but those are the realities. So maybe even some of you that were on the webinar now may have fallen off. But Vianney, let's move forward. So thank you very much for joining us from the CIPC. You're senior manager there, specifically focusing on this area of work. So let's hand over to you. You've got some things that you want to share with us. That's in the form of slides too. So shall we just jump into that, Vianney? Thank you very much for coming to share your insights and information with us here today. We are a keen group of business practitioners, business support practitioners that want to learn how we can feed into this way of supporting clients too.
Thank you very much, Chris, for affording me the opportunity to be part of this podcast occasion. It's indeed an honor, and thank you very much to Mandabai for a comprehensive presentation. He has made my work quite simple, for he has dealt with the major issues when it comes to business rescue. And I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the audience that we're sharing this information with them. And indeed, we can argue that the need is at the core of government to ensure that businesses are saved, because it is businesses that provide jobs in a larger scale. Though we know that government also employs people, but it is businesses that are employing people, particularly your small, medium enterprises, and they also then contribute to the economic growth of the country. And as Madabai has mentioned, that the judicial management gave us some kind of a breather, but it did not meet, according to the legislatures, what the intended purpose. Hence, there was the introduction of the business rescue. And as we know that we are currently, we were quite unprepared by this pandemic, COVID, which negatively affected the livelihood of people. And that then caused many corporates to be severely affected.
Vianney, sorry, I need to interrupt you because your sound isn't that great. So I wonder if you switch over to your computer. On which one are you talking? Are you talking on your computer or on your cell phone?
On my cell phone.
Okay, so why don't you mute your cell phone and
do you
then
want to go on my computer?
I think so. So let's just see. In fact, maybe if Kenneth is ready for us, then maybe we can ask him to just switch on his camera and his. Or maybe let's do this. Let's address a question quickly with Windabai. Windabai, there are two questions in the while Vianney is switching over. Windabai, if you want to switch on your camera and your sound so long, then we can address Leta's question. So. Okay, you see that question about Leta saying that if a client's already gone into liquidation, is it possible for the court to rather reverse to business rescue?
Yes. So if the company has gone into liquidation, if any decision of that nature, which is quite unprecedented, is made, then that will be by the discretion of the court. So what you actually find in business rescue is where I think a lot of processions and a lot of the proceedings are guided a lot by the courts, because Chapter 6 in itself sort of like simply provides an overview framework. So occasionally we do have some surprise rulings that come from the courts, but that's where business rescue takes its cue from. So if that was ever to happen, yes, it has to come through by decision of court.
Okay, great. So thanks for the question. There's space for more questions. And post-question we've noted. So Vuyani, you'll just have to turn the sound off on your cell phone then if you move over to the microphone, I mean the speakers. Otherwise it's not going to work either. So just turn the sound off on down on your cell phone speakers and tune it up on your cell phone. Yeah, so you'll be talking on your computer and we got the video from your cell phone. That's kind of like a feat.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear much better. That's much better. Yeah. So you were talking about the perspective and the shift that's happening now. So maybe we can move on to the purpose of business rescue then.
Yes. So as Modebai also mentioned, the purpose was to facilitate the rehabilitation and also provide then companies with the temporary relief. And it has been mentioned that the intended purpose was to then ensure that the business rescue takes place within the first 3 months, but it has proven that it is not possible practically, hence it takes longer. And it is indeed for the companies that are financially distressed, not companies that, as Modebai mentioned, that they are already in liquidation. But we have those challenges currently where we see that companies, they come very late and they come to us where they are already in liquidation. Probably that is why the stats shows that the third, they end up in liquidation because the practitioners try their level best, but there's no way of resuscitating the company at that point. Can you move to the next slide? So our mandate as CIPC then, in terms of the functions, is that we accredit the professional bodies, and we also license individuals that meet the criteria in terms of the Act, that is the qualifications set in terms of Section 138. And we also monitor then the patterns in terms of compliance, so that to ensure that then the business rescue practitioners, because they have a total control over these entities, they do not then run these businesses amok. So we have to ensure that they comply with the requirements, and also they ensure that companies are brought back into business. And we also promote then the business rescue provisions of the Act by ensuring that we conduct the practitioners when they supposed to submit their reports, they submit them timeously, and at times we provide also advisory role and also raise awareness through our these webinars, and also we have as part of our function to go out and educate people. So those are, in a nutshell, some of the responsibilities or functions that we do in terms of business rescue. Now, the business rescue then life cycle. So we start with the proceedings, and the proceedings then it means that then the company, it's either in terms of Section 129, they will then resolve to put the business under business rescue. And after they have done that, then they have to file within 5 days after they have resolved with us a form SOR 123.1, and that form is accompanied then with then a resolution. And then after then they have done that, then they will have to appoint the practitioner. And then after having appointed the practitioner, it is a form SOR 123.2 that is filed with us. And then they have to notify then the affected parties of the practitioner within 5 days after the filing of the appointed practitioner. Then the appointed practitioner then has to assess the affairs of the entity in order then to make the informed decision. And then the directors, therefore, are supposed to provide the appointed practitioner with all the information which will assist then the practitioner to make an informed decision. And that information then will be in a form of a business rescue plan in terms of what is the plan now moving forward. As you cannot have then a one size fits all, because it would depend what was the reason for the company to go under. So that plan then will then address the issues that the company find itself facing. That plan will have to be approved by the affected parties, and then after the plan has been approved, then the implementation of the plan. And if the rescue is not completed within 3 months, and then the practitioner is expected then to furnish us as a regulator with the reports, giving us an update as to how far are they in terms of the plan. The challenging issue at the present moment is that the business rescue plan is not required in terms of law to be filed with CIPC. And now when you receive the reports, it's difficult then to check against the plan. But what we sometimes require is that for us to be happy is to ensure that then we prepare, and we're in that process to prepare the minimum requirements of the things that we want to see in those reports, so that we ensure that then we're able to ensure that the reports are in line with the plan. And then after that, then it will be a substantial implementation where what the plan aimed to achieve has been achieved. If not, then the company will go to a liquidation or whatever that the company decides to do. But the practitioner plays a very important role in terms of the business rescue proceedings.
Great, thanks, Vianney. That's kind of concise and clear. So the CIPC is also responsible for the registration or certification of business rescue practitioners, isn't that so?
The licensing, not certification, but the licensing, yeah. So what we do then, we license practitioners that qualifies in terms of the Section 138 of the Companies Act, meaning that the practitioner has to belong and be a member and be in good standing of a profession which is accredited by CIPC. And we are, in terms of the Act, only accredit those professional bodies that are in legal, accounting, or in business. And as Mondebai mentioned earlier on, that some people might have an interest, but they might be belonging to a professional body that is in engineering. And it is not then prescribed that we can accredit professional bodies in engineering. So those are the challenging features. And that is why then what we are trying to do is to come up with a competency framework for the business rescue practitioners, since you cannot say an accountant or a lawyer is an ideal person for a business rescue. So we are coming up with that information so that we can be able then to identify the competencies that a business rescue practitioner should have.
Yeah. So Ledimo is asking if IBASA is such an accredited professional body.
Yes, IBASA is one of the accredited professional bodies.
So members of IBASA would be able to apply to CIPC to be recognized as business rescue practitioners.
Yes, they will be able to apply, and upon their application, they will have to furnish us with the letter of good standing. And what normally happens is that then the professional body will assess the competency of a member that applies for that. And if then the professional body is happy, then they will issue that particular person with a letter of good standing.
Okay, great. So Ledimo, please hang on till the end of the webinar when we kind of wrap up the rest of the proceedings. Wenderby will be able to share some more information with you there. It sounds like you're one of the 26% that's participating in the poll thus far. If you haven't voted yet, please do so. The poll should have popped up on your screen. If you didn't, it may be hidden behind the window, or if you're on a mobile or the phone, just swipe a few times and you'll get to the poll. I'm going to close that now. We have about a third of, there's some more voting happening now, so I'm going to keep it open for a second or two more. So please, if you want to kind of just register your interest there, it's also an indication, sort of for us in terms of what kind of topics we can cover in the future that interest you. So I'm going to say going, gone, and then let's do the screen share, and I can pop the result in there for you to see too. So about a third, just over a third of us are saying yes, business rescue as a profession is something for us to consider, and about 30% say yes, it's the next step. So that adds up to about 60-70% of us in the room. So, and only a few, 10 of us on the webinar say no, it's not for you. So it's not for everyone, definitely not so. But it's interesting to note. And so thanks, Vuyani, for sharing all of that with us. Well, we can perhaps move on to Kenneth, who kind of speaks a bit from a practical perspective. So Kenneth, if you can switch on your camera and your sound, there you are.
Am I coming through?
We can hear you very well. Yeah. We don't have to do a jump through a few hoops to hear you, luckily. So I'm going to do a screen share, Kenneth, and then. So Kenneth is from Niction Consulting, practicing in the profession, so to speak, and can share some practical insights that he's gained over time in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And as a IBASA member, sort of being active as a business rescue practitioner too. So, Kenneth, let's give over to you. But just by the way, I just want to remind everyone in the room, we only have 2 questions open still. There's scope for us to do more, so please put your questions in there. I see Letta is asking which professional bodies do you recommend? Kenneth, which would you recommend?
IBASA. No, listen, on a serious note, right? Like the other speakers have said, to register as a business rescue practitioner, you're pretty much coming from 3 fields, right? It's the legal, it's the accounting, or it's the business advisory. And from a business advisory perspective, if memory serves me correctly, there's only 2 organizations you can register with. One of them is IBASA, and the other is TMA. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm from IBASA. But yeah, those are really only the 2 options you can. And I suppose it's personal choice. When I register with IBASA, and sort of not unhappy with that decision. So,
right.
So that's what I would
say. Let's get into the practice of business rescue. So what you've got some experience that you want to share with us.
Yeah, thanks, Christoph. Just to set the trend, so my experience spans a combination of, let's call it business and supply chain, but around business turnaround, but also business rescue. And I sort of want to dive in between both of those interchangeably. So to the attendees, thank you for the opportunity, firstly. If you can just click the button for me. So a lot of this is what Wendabai and Vuyani have spoken about holistically. And I just wanted to summarize that business rescue is an opportunity where you find yourself in difficulty, and it's an opportunity to step back, rethink, restructure, and survive. Right? That's really the key focus. And obviously to do that, there's a process that supports us in doing that. And obviously you have to have the right resources to do that. Yeah, if you can go for me. Okay. So the reality of business rescue is that in South Africa, we've only got a 10 to 15% success rate. And the balance is either liquidated, and as a previous speaker said, there's 1/3 results in liquidation, but there's a large portion that's actually set aside by the courts. Now, there's various reasons, obviously, for that. But one of the ones that I've seen often is a lack of preparation by the organization and the directors themselves, but also the person they're working with, be it the business rescue practitioner, etc. Because remember, and Vuyani can probably confirm this a bit later on, but a business rescue practitioner, when the application, for example, goes to CIPC, is confirmed by CIPC, but in the documentation that's submitted, it is the directors who is probably already working with a business rescue practitioner. So the name is in the documentation. So in my view, the question then arises is that the right person for it? And comments were made earlier around you've got legal people and you've got accounting people. Are those the right people for it? And that's something we'll unpack a bit later as well. If you take the UK, and I just took it as an example, they have a 30% success rate. And we're sitting at probably half of that, best case. And the UK also is very reliant on the SMME sector, where 69% of the economy is contributed to by SMMEs. So if you take a South African context, we also are heavily dependent on SMMEs in terms of employment, etc. So that's the reality we face, is that our success rate is poor. There's various reasons for it, and we'll unpack some of that as well. Okay, so you can just skip one more for me. So I've sort of put challenges in two areas. The one is practical and one is procedural. The reality is they actually were interchangeable. So some of the practical challenges is a business rescue practitioner's time requirements is extremely high, and therefore it leads to potentially high costs. So when you now talk SMMEs, especially your EMEs, etc., you also have to ask yourself, can they afford this process as well? And obviously with CIPC and stuff, they do set guidelines in terms of costs and things like that. But you also get reputational damage. So therefore your business owner gets very attached to their business and the legacy they've created. So they may or may not be keen to want to go into business rescue. And what happens is, the last point I said is too little too late. So they leave it too late to make the decision. And I think our community as business rescue practitioners, but more especially as business advisors, I think we got a big role to play with these SMMEs to guide them on where they are in their journey. And if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, on the x-axis is time and on the y-axis is rate of success. And all I've done is I've basically, what I'm putting forward to you guys is that I've summed it up in three categories. CI is continuous improvement, sort of business as usual, and people have engaged with business rescue practitioners or any other, sorry, not business rescue practitioners, but business advisors, people who are continuously driving change and improvement. And the first type of business owner would fall under the CI column. And what happens there is that person is generally proactive, they're engaging with professionals, and they're continuously looking to see how they can change their ways of doing business and how they can continuously improve. And what happens there is, and that's the green and the red, is there's a high probability that they will continue to be a growing concern and be a sustainable, profitable business, which is why you see more green and less red. Then you've got business turnaround. Okay, this is where, like one of the speakers mentioned, is the boat's leaking, or you as a person, you're starting to bleed and you realize you're bleeding. You might not know why, you might not know how bad it is, but you know that you are working extremely hard and you're still having issues in terms of profitability, etc. And what you do then is you go into engaging with professional people, be them engineering guys, business advisors, etc., who can then come have a look at your business and say, how do I turn around and how do I stop that flow? How do I stop the bleeding? Okay, and that is why the likelihood of success diminishes a little bit, and failure can increase, but you're trying to stem the flow as early as humanly possible on that journey. The last one is business rescue, and like we said, the reality is 10 to 15% in South Africa failure rate, and a large portion set aside by the courts. And for me, this is, imagine you're bleeding, but you're terminal, you're critical. So you're literally on the operating theater, and you've got business rescue practitioners around you, and they're trying to save you. It's a case of too little, too late. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. And for me, these are practical considerations that one must take when we're advising our clients on how to do this. Okay. Then if I move on to some of the more procedural sort of challenges, you know, and I've listed a few there. So one of it is the disconnect between the business rescue laws and the practical application. And, you know, for example, Vuyani mentioned that, you know, Chapter 6 gives an overview, and then there's obviously interpretation depending on the situation that we face. You know, there's also the provisions. So Vuyani mentioned that when we have to give feedback as business rescue practitioners, we don't necessarily provide the detailed plan. So it becomes very difficult for the guys from CIPC to evaluate our progress against it. Okay, so there's a law that says one thing and then there's a practical application. And bear in mind that typically you get the first 3 months when you go into business rescue. But the first probably 20 days is around meeting creditors, putting the plan together, etc. So yes, there is a disconnect between those laws and the practical application of it. Then there's a lack of a holistic approach, and I'm going to come back to that just now because it talks to the square peg round hole syndrome. Okay, and then there's a singularity of the creditor, and basically, if you take, in my experience, the banks, for example, they're extremely risk adverse. And remember, the purpose of Business Rescue is how do we transform this company? How do we save it? How do we make it into a growing concern? But to do that, you need all stakeholders to be aligned to that sort of ideal, which sometimes requires certain people to take more risk and actually continue to put money into the organization to help it. And this is where the Business Rescue Plan has to be detailed enough to prove to these individuals that it is possible and you're not throwing sort of good money after bad. Okay. Then I've got validation by numbers and the Business Rescue Plan versus a turnaround strategy. Now, often when we look at turnaround, people want to know the detail. Okay. And that's the right thing to do. But when we look at a Business Rescue Plan, I've seen some plans that have been very high level. And one of the reasons for this, and don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not having a go at the legal fraternity or the accounting fraternity. But the reason I say this is for me to be successful at Business Rescue, there's three really elements that comes into it. The one is the legal aspect. The two is the sort of accounting, sort of tax sort of aspects. And the third is the business advisory or business management aspects. Now, depending on the complexity of the business that's gone into Business Rescue, you want to be able to put a plan that touches on all those 3 points to give you the best possible chance of success. And that's what I mean when I say lack of an holistic approach. Because if you gave just the accountant to do it, or just the lawyer to do it, or just the business advisor to do it, they come with a certain bias and they're looking through it through a certain lens. It's not necessarily an holistic approach, and it might not necessarily be what's best for the business. And this then links back to the square peg round hole syndrome, which essentially says, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, if you try and put a square peg in a round hole, you're not going to get the results you want. In fact, you might break something.
So Kenneth, what you're saying is that there's still scope for us in the industry and in the policy framework and so on to make some improvements so that the rescue options, whether it's through turnaround or through formal courts being involved, there's scope for us to make some improvements. It's not ideal. It's not as it should be yet.
No, absolutely. And I think, both the speakers have mentioned that this is relatively new in South Africa, right? It's just coming up to 10 years. So it is new for everybody. And therefore, the understanding and the education around it needs to be a lot greater. And yes, then in the actual process, there needs to be the improvement so that we ensure that we got the right people doing the right things to give us the best possible chance of success.
Yeah.
If I can just touch on this stuff, one of the things
Sure.
even Vijani mentioned is that when we assign they're responsible and they accredit or license people, okay? But we need to see, as a suggestion or as an example, how do we make sure that we've got the right group of business rescue practitioners and that they bring in the right resources in terms of turnaround specialists, etc., to make sure that we're putting a holistic plan together that we can execute in an efficient way and give us the best possible chance of success.
Yeah. So, Gretchen, on that note, can I ask that Vuyani and Windabai join us too, if you can switch on your cameras, and I'll put up, in the meantime, I'll put up the contact details of the panelists for the rest of us. Thanks for making your emails available. If someone wants to contact you directly with some questions they still have. By the way, there's been quite a bit of activity there in the Q&A, and thanks Windabai and Vuyani for being so diligent in answering those. So this is the beauty there. So if you haven't opened the Q&A button, by the way, you can do so, and you'll be able to see the answers to some of the questions. So let us questions. And Paul, thank you for your question around SARS. So I'm not going to repeat what we said there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panel to just each perhaps note something of interest from the questions that we've had, from the text chat that they've noticed, or from the proceedings thus far. We are now already at past the half hour, so In fact, we need to move on to the IBASA slot now. But as concluding remarks, so if you're an attendee and you haven't seen the Q&A, you can just click on the Q&A button. You'll be able to see there the questions that have been asked. And thanks for Wunderbar and Vuyani for giving some detailed information there. So let's go, Vuyani, if we can start with you. If you want to make a final comment and something maybe that you noticed during the event today. You need to unmute, remember? So just unmute. I'm not sure if you can unmute on your computer or your...
Can you hear me now?
We hear you well, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for those who have an interest in becoming business rescue practitioners, because we have some challenges whereby people, because of they have served as board members in most of the companies, they think that then that qualifies you to be a business rescue practitioner. I just want to highlight that all companies, they have directors, and it is those companies that go under business rescue with directors. Therefore, it does not mean if you're a director of a company or you have served in many boards that qualifies you to be a business rescue practitioner. Now, when we are looking in terms of experience, you are looking experience in terms of turnaround activities or business rescue. And what we are looking for is that you need to demonstrate to us that you will be able to rescue a company, not to say that you can run a company. Most people can run a company, but we need people that can be able to rescue a company when it goes under. So we need that particular information, and it makes it easy for people just to give us a detailed information that I was involved in this company. This was the challenge, and this is how this was my role, and this was the outcome. So that we were able to make a determination in terms of whether your category is you are a junior or you are an experienced or a senior practitioner. Thanks.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. That's quite clear, and I think for all of us, that are considering this, it's not only then a question of our suitability as business advisors, but someone that would be focusing specifically on the disciplines involved in rescue. So Kenneth, if I can ask you that, what would you say, apart from what other comments that you want to make, if I can address a specific question to you, what's the difference between being a business advisor, supporting, being a mentor business advisor, supporting business owners, entrepreneurs out there, and the attitude that a business rescue practitioner needs to have? How would you say, what is that distinctive factor? And then maybe if you want to make any other comments of things that you've noticed today.
Okay, no, perfect, thank you. So firstly, I mean, they are quite close, obviously, right? The thing though is that as a business advisor and a turnaround specialist, the process is not as rigid, for one, and rightfully so. Whereas with business rescue practitioners, there is a set process. You have to hit certain touch points and tick off certain boxes. And again, because you want to be in compliance with the process. Because the other reality is, we've got, like Vuyani said, because you're a director doesn't mean you can be a business rescue. It means you can run a business. And let's face it, the reason we got business rescue is because those same directors have sometimes run those businesses into the ground. And therefore, a business rescue practitioner, the reason you're tied to that process is to also give you the guidelines, but also give you the protection to enable you to do the right things to get this business back where you want it to be and be a growing concern. The second thing with a business rescue practitioner as well, you got a shorter period of time, you got less time to build up trust, etc., and develop the relationship, versus in turnaround and business advisory, you could potentially have a longer period of time to hit the right marks. Yeah. So therefore, one of the key characteristics is when you go as a business rescue practitioner, you have to be very clear on what it is you want to achieve. You have to be very clear with your stakeholders, i.e. the directors, on what it is you want to achieve. And to be honest with you, and this might sound a bit blunt, but there were times or two where I'd rather walk away from some people because they have a very different idea of why they want to use this process. And it's actually not in keeping with the purest form of why you want to go into business rescue. They heard someone tell them that, like the gentleman has said, there's a moratorium, nobody can touch me, my creditors can't come knock on my door. So they do it because they want that respite, right? Versus going through the process. And if they're not buying into the process, then honestly, they shouldn't be in the process, and it'll just frustrate you as a business rescue practitioner. So you have to be able to do that assessment as well.
Great. No, thank you. Thanks for that practical assessment too. I think that was most useful. So Winabai, before we just talk about a few things about IBASA membership and so on, and then come back to business rescue. So by the way, if you're interested in this as part of your professional offering, I recommend highly that you stay on with Winabai. Maybe it's going to be 20 minutes or so, or 15 minutes of time to invest into understanding a bit more what it is about. But before we do so, if you have final comments, Winabai, just before we let go of those that aren't interested in pursuing that.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So for me, business rescue is something that I am quite passionate about. If you are passionate about business, you'll be passionate about business rescue. It gives us affords us an opportunity for us to serve businesses. Where I find the success of business rescue in this country is going to come from is through the role of the CIPC and the role of the professional bodies in regulating effectively and ensuring that we have qualifying people that gets appointed to actually rescue these businesses. I think at the moment we are sitting with two main issues with business rescue practitioners. I think we've already heard just a few minutes ago, we actually sometimes do have business rescue practitioners who are not competent. The fact that you're a director of 50 years does not make you a competent turnaround or business rescue practitioner. So that becomes an issue, and obviously that leads into the second point where I think Vianney was saying we are busy with the competence framework. We need to have a national competence framework of what a business rescue practitioner should look like. At the moment, we don't have that, but it's something that is obviously on the cards. I think when we do have that, and we know that there's this holistic set of skill that is very unique, it's neither a lawyer, it's neither an accountant, it's neither a business, it's actually a profession on its own. Then I believe we are going to have credible business rescue practitioners who are not only competent, but also have ethical values in order to contribute positively within the business rescue space.
Okay, great stuff. I think that's a great point to pause on. So we'll come back to the details of what you want to share with us, Winabai, just now. By the way, I see Vianney is typing ferociously on answering the questions still. So just click on that Q&A button if you haven't followed the questions there around things like costs and so on. It's all being addressed in the text that you can read there, so we don't have to repeat that. Just that you can so long register for the next IBASA and EPI webinar. The likely topic there that we are planning on is updating on the professionalization of the industry. There's a new version of the quality assurance discussion paper that's been issued by CEDA and other parties, leading into the policy discussion around what is needed to assure quality in business advising. And we hope that that will be the topic for next month. I think it's for the 17th of September is the planned date. So you can do that so long. And by the way, if you're not an IBASA member yet, there's a process for you to follow. You can go to the website to read more about that, or send an email to admin@ibasa.org.za, admin@ibasa.org.za. There's some fees for you to take account of because for the assessment and so on, and then there's an annual membership fee, of course, too. But yeah, so those are the things that you need to know. The website is ibasa.org.za, and the email is admin@ibasa.org.za. And so with that, sort of the CPD part of our proceedings are done. So just to ask if I'll type this address in the text chat too, if you are able to just give us feedback, sort of on how things are and what the topics are that you find and what the experience is for you during these CPD events, it would be great. Webinar-feedback.the-epi.org is the address. If you can just click on that, and it will take you a minute, not more. Thanks. I see Carl is posting it for us there. So it's great to have Carl back too. For you that don't know, Carl has been producing the series for several years now. Had a big surgery and he's still recouping on that, but he can't stay away, you know, sort of. So thanks for being here, Carl. So yeah, so Winnabai, so you disappeared from my screen now, so I think you kind of maybe have switched off your camera. I hope you didn't disappear from our meeting. You're still here. So let's just shift mode then. So if I can hand over to you, so the floor is yours, you know, sort of, so I can help you in facilitating the discussion and so on, but please guide us in how you would like to take things from here.
All right. No, thank you so much, Christoph. So I think in this section, I actually wanted more to give or afford an opportunity for the audience from whatever platform they are joining us from to ask any direct questions that we can obviously address. There are a few questions that I've taken note of, not all of them. I'm not too sure. Maybe Christoph, you can just help me there with sort of like bring forward the questions. But there was a question that I was busy trying to type a response on in terms of the qualifications. So I think it was later she was asking what kind of courses do you need to do for business rescue? Okay, so like I said, because your chapter 6 is fairly new, what we have is some very basic high-level guidelines in the Act, and a lot of these things we are not yet sort of like detailed. So if you go into the Act, all it says is a business rescue practitioner must be a person from a recognized professional body. It identifies 3 areas: legal profession, accounting profession, and business advising. Essentially, what happens is people apply regardless of the qualifications which they do have. Like Viana had explained, they will review the qualifications and the experience in terms of turnaround. So if you have an engineer and he has got a good engineering qualification, he has led turnaround, and they can demonstrate that they were engaged in active turnaround and it was successful, there's no reason why that person can't be regarded as a business rescue practitioner. However, in view of what I just said earlier, that there's actually a competence framework on the cards, and we're hoping that it comes out soon. So there is going to be, hopefully, with that competence framework, a whole qualification for business rescue practitioners, like the way we have the one for financial analysts, where they've got a CFA, they've got their own board exam, because this is a separate set of skills, like we had already indicated. So I hope later that answers your question. The other question that was also interesting was that of SARS. I think I tried to respond to it on the charts. And the question was, is SARS actually supportive of this particular process? Okay. The interesting point to note there is, remember, SARS always comes into business rescue as a creditor. And when we spoke about aligning interests, I think Dr. Moodley made mention of that, is that the creditors normally feel like they are losing something because obviously they are assuming more risk. So they will normally be very averse going into business rescue. But what we've actually found is that SARS actually does come to the party, and they are also part of the regulations and the policies which come out. So in terms of business rescue liaison committee of the CIPC, SARS is actually a part of that. So when policy around business rescue is discussed, SARS is actually present. So they will support, because remember, the more successful the rescue, the more likely that they will recover more of the taxes rather than if it went to liquidation. So they do actually get supportive from that point of view. And they can actually issue with the tax clearance if that is required as part of the rescue process.
Okay, great. So I just want to note, we've got the chairperson of IBASA, Tumelo Tsochi, in the room too. So Tumelo, if you want to switch on your camera, we didn't have someone from IBASA speaking about how to sign up and so on, but we do have a moment still. Meanwhile, we can steal it from your time, just for giving Tumelo time. So Tumelo, if you can switch on your camera and your sound, we can bring you in. Or if you want to do it at the end, we can do that too. So maybe I just transferred Tumelo from an attendee to a panelist, so that's taking a moment. But if I can, Winnabai, just as a practitioner myself, sort of, so if I'm interested now, sort of what from IBASA, so you're kind of spearheading the IBASA process here. What support or help is IBASA planning to offer me, or whoever else is thinking this is perhaps a step for me to take? What can we expect from IBASA to help us in this?
Okay, no, thank you so much about that. So I think Kenneth already mentioned that IBASA is an accredited professional body with the CIPC in terms of the Act to obviously monitor and regulate business rescue practitioners. So essentially, if you are a member of IBASA in good standing, and you apply for business rescue practitioner licensing, IBASA is then going to receive your application and process it. We do have a disciplinary, we do have a panel within IBASA in the Business Rescue Committee that looks at applications where we evaluate your application, we evaluate your CVs and your competence, and once we are satisfied, we then issue a letter to the CIPC for them to then consider your application for licensing as a business rescue practitioner. So if you are an IBASA member and in good standing, then you are welcome to send an application using the credentials which were given earlier. I think it's admin@ibasa.org.za. And that will come through to us, the Business Rescue Committee of IBASA, and we are going to evaluate the application in that particular aspect.
Are there costs involved in that process?
Yes, there are costs involved in the process. So in terms of the costs that are involved in the process, because obviously the panel has to sit and adjudicate the application. For first-time applicants, it's 950, and for annual renewals, it's 750. We are currently considering a package which is going to be a little bit more costly than that, but what it will do is we are trying to also bring in a lot of education element into it. So one of the key requirements of you being a member in good standing, and which is also a requirement of the CIPC, is that you have to meet certain criteria in terms of continuous professional development. So we are busy designing programs which will then go towards education, and that will qualify as CPD points for our business rescue practitioners. And those will be made available to the members, yeah.
Great, that sounds very promising. I see Pearl is asking what are the requirements for when you do the evaluation. So just to get a sense, who would qualify, so we don't kind of enter a process that we won't qualify for?
Definitely. I don't think we'd actually want to stifle the opportunity. Would encourage anyone to apply. So what will happen is when you do an inquiry, or when you make an inquiry with the institute, they're going to send you a form. We call it a BRP 01 or 02 form. I think there are two of them, one for new applicants and the other one for renewals. What that document essentially does is it details all the documents that you're supposed to do. It also includes an affidavit. Obviously, there are certain affidavits and declarations you have to make, like you've got no criminal records, you've never been disbarred from being appointed as a director, because that's a key requirement in terms of the Act, that you should not be obviously disbarred from being a director for you to be a BRP. So then the affidavit essentially with your CV and detailed qualifications and any other education information that gets provided to the Secretariat, and then we are able to evaluate on that basis.
Great stuff. So I'm not sure, Kenneth and Vuyani, if there are any comments that you want to make too, but Wunderbar, it's actually your time. So if you want to keep focusing on the questions coming in, we can do so, or are there other things that you would like to address? I'm just also aware of the time, and we still have a full house, but we've got like 8 minutes to the hour, and perhaps that should be our target for finishing off. So whichever way you would like to. And then Tumelo is in the room now. So Tumelo, if you can, we would like at the end maybe for you to just kind of say thanks and so on and show your face. If you can maybe switch on your camera and sound, then that would be great. I see there is some issues here with the video and so on. So maybe you are struggling. But in any case, if you could, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll speak to you some other time. But so the rest of the time, Wunderbar is kind of yours, or Kenneth or Vuyani, if you want to comment something in terms of where we are now too, that would be great. There's some questions that are still not answered, so maybe we can tackle some of them while we have time. I don't know.
Yeah. In terms of where we are, I think we've made some great strides in terms of improving the landscape of the business rescue, particularly when we established this business rescue liaison committee. I think it has made life easy because initially people thought that creditors were anti-business rescue, whereas creditors were not, and that became apparent when we called all the affected parties and also those who are interested to be part of this committee. And I think what is still outstanding, it is for then the labor unions to be part of this, because they are a major stakeholder, and when a company goes under, a lot of people, they lose their jobs. And I think it is one of the things that we are still trying to establish, to get the unions to be part of our committee, so that we know that we have covered everyone who is part of the affected parties.
Yeah, no, indeed. So, I mean, the whole purpose of this process is to protect the parties, the interest of the various parties, not only the directors of the company or the shareholders of the company. Kenneth, you were unmuting, so I think you wanted to share something too.
Yeah, I really just want to just respond to Vuyani as well. But what I wanted to share earlier was, and whenever I covered this, but one of the questions was the support from IBASA, and I think a big element is the CPD element. So yes, there's a portion of evaluating you so you get in, and you can apply to be a licensed business rescue practitioner. But IBASA also provides, and there's a lot of work being done there, led by Wunderbar, but they provide a framework for you to ensure that you're also continuously learning. Because remember what we said earlier, it's about becoming an holistic, taking an holistic approach. And you can't go and get a degree in law and then a degree in accounting and then be a business advisor or an engineer or whatever the case is. But you need to get enough knowledge so that you can have an holistic approach to it. And a lot of what Wunderbar and the team is doing is looking at those types of things as well. And I think there'll be even more coming down the road, which will help us increase our understanding, etc. And then just the last comment from me to what Vuyani said, it's actually very encouraging to see that there's actions being taken to break down the silos. Because in my opinion, and like the other guys, yeah, I'm passionate about this, is the best chance of success is having the right people around the room with the right skills and the right intent. And that type of education, I think, will go a long way towards helping us increase that 10 to 15% to even higher.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Good. Thanks. So, Wunderbar, perhaps the final word is with you. I'm not sure. Sort of the Arstal Mandisa was asking about actual successes. Sort of maybe an example of something that you're aware of, just to give some color to what a business rescue project looks like.
I think actually what maybe we can do is to do a compilation, because there's actually quite a few. But I think if you want to go into our communities and actually see where this has happened, we're going to remember that we had the case of, was it African Bank? African Bank that went successfully through business rescue. And there's been quite a few of successes there, obviously. But like I said, I think because business rescue is so unique that each case can only be evaluated in the context of whatever the issue was in that particular organization. We'll actually do a compilation of these. If you look at SAA, for instance, the question there might be, is the business rescue in South African Airways successful? And one might actually argue that it is, because the business rescue practitioners have come up with a plan to restructure the affairs of the airline. I think the only thing that is standing in their way now is the funding that is required. So in terms of that context, obviously it's always difficult. But what we'll do is, from an educational element, and that I just want to also just amplify that point in terms of the education element, that we are going to put across documentations in terms of research as well as court cases if the document or the article has been made available in the presentation from where the presentation came from, you actually realize that in that particular article, there are also court cases as well that are attached. So what we'll do is we'll do a very nice compilation of business rescue cases together with court cases that give direction and also sort of like a view of how successful and what actually was achieved in that particular rescues space. So we're definitely going to do that. And then lastly, we are going to, I think I already touched on that we'll make available a series. There's actually quite a series of webinars and whether they're just recorded and material that covers these aspects of business rescue in detail. So you might have seen we just did an introduction today. So one of the items on the series, for instance, is how do you then handle a creditors meeting, which happens during the course of the business rescue, and how do you generate or how do you drop a business rescue plan? So this will be all education material that is forthcoming, and I'm actually quite excited that we are busy working on this. So we should just keep our eyes set on the IBASA website. We are going to be alerted as that material becomes available.
Great, thank you. I think that's a good way to conclude. So keep your eyes kind of geared towards where that is going to come from, and lots of value to gain. And for those that want to reach out, we shared the email addresses. admin@ibasa.org.za is the one for most of these things. But thank you very much for joining. I see we still have like over 70 people in the room, which means we could have lasted another hour, I suppose. But I hope that was a good introduction for most of you. Thanks. I think Kugan says there it was a very informative session and he appreciates it. I definitely learned a lot too, so thanks, Kenneth. You do have a doctor in front of your name, which kind of, I suppose, qualifies you to be knowledgeable about things, and it sounds clearly so. So thank you for making your time available to share the practice of things too. And for Yanni, sort of from the regulation side and from the agency, the custodian of the process, thank you for sharing that. And thank also, you. Sort of having noted those things that where for smaller businesses specifically, we may have to kind of tune things a bit finer, so with the Department of Small Business Development and the other role players there, to know that there are talks around that is good to know. And then lastly, Winnabai, sort of you as the custodian within IBASA of this process, thank you very much for showing the leadership and for bringing the knowledge here to the rest of us too. So have a good Thursday, the rest of the day, everyone, the afternoon and the evening. And while we are now able to support our clients that can move a bit freer, of course, the call is to stay safe, people, and don't go party too much.
Sure.
If you visit people, do that carefully. If you're out there, be careful, please. Stay safe, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.